My name is Marie-Cecile, and I'm a community education coordinator from the Kent County area. So I cover all of Kent County and Shediac area. And excuse me, like I said earlier, we are going to talk about mental health in the workplace, which is a very important subject when it comes to workplace and also mental health. So I just want to explain to you a little bit how it's going to go. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go through the presentations, and if you have any questions, you can put them in the Q&A, question and answer in your Zoom, and I will answer all your questions at the end. If you're like me, if you're scared to forget your questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A during the presentation. I have absolutely no problem with that. And what I'll do, I'll look at them at the end of the presentation. For the second thing, if you look in the chat, you will see three links. So we have our YouTube page, our web page, and our Facebook page. And we encourage everyone actually to go visit them. That's where all our scheduled sessions are. And there's also on our YouTube page, if you've missed a session or there's a session that you would like to see again, it's all in our YouTube page. All right. So we are going to start. The Canadian Mental Health Association was founded about 100 years ago in 1918, and it's a national charity that helps maintain and improve mental health for all Canadians. So as a province-wide leader and champion for mental health, CMHA helps people access different community resources that they need to build resilience and support recovery from mental illness. There are 18 different locations in the province, 3 main offices, Fredericton, Moncton, and St. John. And then throughout the province, we have, I think we're at 11 community education coordinator. And those are employers just like me in certain regions. So we have some in Westmoreland and Albert, we have Kent County, Shediac area, and we also have some in Sussex. So just to name a few places where we have the community education coordinator. We also have a program called the Provincial Peer Support, and these are certified peer support. This is a certified peer support program that seeks to train individuals with lived experience with mental illness. So what they do is really to instill hope and inspire others through similar circumstances that recovery is possible. And we also have the employment program called Stronger Together in Charlotte County. And with this program, it's to provide services or needed jobs to get individuals ready, and individuals actually that are living with diversified disabilities that are living in Charlotte County. So they get them job ready by maybe assisting them into resumes, cover letters, interview techniques, and as well as working with employers and providing on-the-job support. So those are all interesting programs that CMHA has to offer. So to start with the presentation, I'm just going to go through a few statistics. I always find statistics very interesting. I find that it catches me for myself. So when it comes to individual that will experience a mental illness at some point in their life, So we say that 1 in 5 individuals will experience mental illness at some point in their life, so 20%. But we also have to keep in mind that 5 out of 5 people sorry, I'm going to restart. So 5 out of 5 people will be affected by mental illness. And when I say affected by mental illness, I mean they might not get a mental illness themselves, but it could be a family member, it could be a close friend, it could be an employer, or it could be their coworkers. So at one point or another in our lives, we come across an individual that we get to know or we know that experiences mental illness. Also, 5 out of 5 people have mental health. So when we talk about mental health, we talk, it's the same as our physical health, but mentally, okay? And we all have a mental health, and it's important to take care of our mental health, just like our physical health. So 70 to 80% of medical visits are stress related. So those are pretty high. So if you think of, I don't know, let's say some individual go to the doctor because he has high blood pressure. The doctor starts talking to him. He's asking about his life, how it's going. And that individual has a lot of stress in his workplace and is not doing well. Well, that could be, the stress in the workplace could be related to his high blood pressure. All right. And 500,000 individuals in Canada each week miss work due to mental health problems. So that is a very high number missing work due to mental health problems. And during the workshop today, hopefully you'll get knowledge or tips and tricks how to take care of your mental health so you don't miss work due to mental health problems. And 5 out of 10, well, here it says, what ranking of leading causes of disability worldwide are mental health problems? So 5 out of 10 are mental health problems, okay? Among those with the most severe and complex mental health problems and illnesses, unemployment is estimated at what percentage? The percentage for that is 70 to 90%. Another very high number. All right, so to get into the session, here we're going to talk about factors that might increase or influence the risk of developing mental illness. So when we look at chemical imbalance, that I'm not a scientist, and I'm not familiar with every chemical in the brain. That's still something I have to learn. But vary the imbalance in the brain, and that can be some factors into developing mental illness. Different individual attributes and behavior also. Substance misuse, and when we talk about substance, it can be drugs or alcohol. So either too much can have an effect or can be a factor for mental illness. Also, different social and economic circumstances. When it comes to social circumstances, different, it can be language barriers, it can be all kinds of social circumstances. For the next one, it can be traumatic life events, such as abuse or something that a car accident. So it all depends on how that person lives through the experience of the event and how the person sees uh, the event. Okay, it can be environmental factors also. So what is going on around the person's or the individual's life. It can also be hereditary. So if a parent has a mental illness, the chances of an individual is a little bit higher to get a mental illness. But if two other person has mental illnesses, the chances are even higher. So let's say you have two parents that have mental illness and that individual has some substance misuse, that increases also the risk of developing mental illness. And then you have other illnesses, okay, such as infection in the brain. And I know I've came across a young lady that had a physical illness that caused her to have some psychosis. Uh, so those would go in other illnesses. Here are different types in mental illness. So we have anxiety disorder. In the anxiety disorders, there are different or illnesses that are under those. So we talk about general anxiety disorder. We can talk about phobias, and just to name a few. And then there is mood disorders. So when we look into mood disorders, we can talk about depression, bipolar, and personality disorder. One of the most popular, I hate to say the word popular, but I'm lacking of the word, personality disorder, mostly known. Borderline personality disorder. We can also see attention deficit disorder, or also with hyperactivity. There is also dementia, substance use disorder, eating disorder, schizophrenia, and other complex mental health problems. This is the mental health continuum. In the mental health continuum, it's going to help you. I'm going to explain to you how to make the difference between mental illness and mental health also, but also how to, it's going to explain that you can have a low mental health without having a mental illness. And I'm going to explain it more so you guys understand. So here, I'm just going to use my cursor here. So on this side, if you see where my little triangle thing is, we're talking about mental health. So when we talk about mental health, we're talking about do we have a great level of stress, okay? Our self-esteem, our resiliency. Are we able to problem solve, okay? So when we have, not when we have, our mental health can be flourishing when in this quadrant. So when we have a good mental health, we can go through our everyday life without any problems. Our stress management is very good. Our self-esteem is okay, or even good. Our self-confidence, we are flourishing at this point, okay? And we have good coping skills. So maybe we might have stress, a little bit of stress, but we are able to handle the stress. in this quadrant at the bottom, we are languishing, and here is when we might have a lot of stress or a certain situation arise, example, loss of a job or loss of a family member, and our mental health is not doing so well, okay? Or we might have more stress and we have a hard time dealing with our stress. So we can have maybe even go into a depression for a little bit, but we don't have mental illness, okay? So, oops, sorry about that. So our mental health is doing less good, but we don't have a mental illness. On this side, if you look on this side, on the top here, the person or the individual is experiencing mental illness or has been diagnosed with a mental illness, and they can either do on this quadrant, their mental health is doing well. So they do have a mental illness, but their symptoms are less and they have good coping skills. They have family to support them. Uh, so they are doing very well, okay? But if you look at the bottom, well, sorry about that. If you look at the bottom here, the person with the mental illness is not doing so well. At this point, they have symptoms of their illnesses coming back. They might not have as good as coping mechanism or coping skills. They might not have the support, or they might have the support, but they have to work to go back to their flourishing. Hopefully that helps you understand a little bit about the continuum. So for our next slide, we're going to talk about the stigma. So in mental illness, there is a lot of stigma. It's becoming a little bit better than it used to, but it's still there. So when we talk about stigma, stigma is the negative and prejudicial ways in which people living with mental illness are labeled. Often that means being labeled as nothing more than the disease itself. Stigma is an internal attitude and belief held by individuals, often about a minority group, such as people with mental illness. So if we think of a person that has been recently diagnosed with, let's say, bipolar illness. So if the person, we have to keep in mind that that person is still a person, but with symptoms, okay? And with proper medication and therapy, that person can live a very good life, okay? There's a lot of discrimination when it comes to mental illnesses. So the way that people living with mental health are treated, so they can be treated in different way, intentionally or unintentionally due to stigma. People with mental illness are often treated with disrespect. They experience such behaviors as exclusion, bullying, aggression, ridicule, and devaluation. Such discrimination can result in limits and barriers to many life's opportunities. So nearly half, 49% of people who think they have been depressed or anxious have never seen a doctor about this problem. And the reason for this is because they are scared of being judged. The stigma or discrimination associated with mental illness presents a significant barrier not only to diagnosis and treatment, but also for community acceptance. Mental illness can be treated effectively, and normal is different for everyone. And also, what normal is. Normal changes every day. For so it's we norm like I said, normal is different for everyone, but also throughout our life, what is normal at one certain point in our life cannot be normal at a certain point, and what's not normal at a certain point can be normal at a certain point, if that makes sense. Where does stigma comes? Stigma comes a lot from media, TV, movies. If we think of, I like to give this example. If we think of a psychiatric unit, and oh, my internet's a bit stable. I'm just going to wait a few seconds. Okay. So if we think of a psychiatric unit, media usually shows us in movies that the employees working there are dressed in white, and the whole hall is white. The patient that is in the unit is staying in a little room, but a white room. That is not the fact. I've worked many years in a psychiatric unit. It's actually a lovely place. Well, a lovely place. Um, Lots of colors. The employees are not dressed in white. So movies and media is really giving us another um, side that we are not really seeing, and that's where stigma usually comes from. So at times we all have different discriminatory and stigmatization ideas or attitudes, but it's also important to recognize discriminatory and stigmatization ideas and attitudes, and examine where it comes from. So also to work to control change the harmful behavior that it may come. So stigma in the workplace, there's two different things here. So if we talk about absenteeism, it's also frequent. It's often frequent, short, unscheduled, or unexpected absences due to sickness or other types of leave. So the person might not go to work, or might not go to the shift, calls in sick. But the presenteesis, it's employee coming to work despite having a sickness that justifies an absence, and as a consequence, they are performing their work under suboptimal conditions. So the person that has presentees might go to work, might present themselves to work, but they are not there. They are there physically, but might not be there mentally, meaning their concentration are not there. They have a harder time doing their work. Here we are going to look at the iceberg concept. In my presentation, I talk a lot about the iceberg concept. I think it's a really good concept. So if we look at an iceberg, we only see 10% of what sits above the surface, and the 90% is below water, and we don't see that, okay? So above water, the 10%, we can see, if we take it for mental illness or poor mental health, we can see the individual's coping strategies, or maybe the reaction to what is going on beneath the surface, or how they act. It's everything that we see with our eyes. But below the surface, the 90%, what we don't see or what we don't know is the person's symptoms, their thoughts, their feelings, related to a mental illness and mental health problems. We also don't know their life experiences. The more we get to know that person, maybe the person will show more. and we'll get to know them more. So that can increase into the 10%, the below the surface. So it's very important when we see certain behaviors in a person, or to think of what is going on in the person. Okay, so what we don't see. So not to judge the 10% of what we see, and try to be think of what they are going through as their feelings and thoughts and life experiences in the 90%. Here we are going to talk about life balance. So when we talk about life balance, we usually talk about the balance of our work life and the balance of our home life. Okay, so still a few statistics. So 58% of Canadians report feeling role overload. Okay, so either they have too much in their jobs or too much at home. Their life is not really balanced. Significantly higher prevalence of anxiety and depression in employees working more than 49 hours. So for a person that works more than 49 hours, and there are quite a few, they can experience more anxiety and depression. But that's not to say that the person that works 44 hours cannot have depression or anxiety. It's different for everyone. In 2005, there was a study made, and they seen that okay, so in 2005, they did a study, and they realized that people spent 45 minutes each week less with their family than they did in 1985. And so now we are 15 years later. I'm sure those numbers have increased quite a few, because we do work more hours, we have more activities, we have more committees involvement in different aspects in our life. Also, employees' performance, rates of illnesses and absenteeism, accidents, and staff turnovers are all affected by employees' mental health status. So I just want you guys to, this is just a reflection. How do you think that we begin to identify possible mental issues among employees? That's just something to think about. Here we are looking at workplace mental health. So the most common presenting workplace mental health problems or illnesses in the workplace are anxiety, depression, and substance abuse. Those are the ones that we see the most. Most often it affects people in their prime working years, so between 24 and 44. Again, that's not to say that a person under 24 can't have a mental illness, or a person more than 44 can't have a mental illness. Okay, so you can have a mental illness anytime in your life if you're prone to it. I've seen children as young as 6, and I've seen adults as old as 90, 94. Okay, just to name a few. Work-life balance is a crucial factor in mental health. The demands in the workplace continue to increase, and as do the numbers of hours most Canadians spend at their job. So 1 out of 4 Canadians work about 50 hours per week or more. Compared to 10 years ago, it was only 1 in 10 person. So we are changing our way of living. There is maybe more demands in our work. prices also in at the stores are going up, and but we don't have as much raises. Like the cost of living is going up, but the paycheck is not always going up. So that means sometimes we have to increase our hours in work or maybe get a second job for some people. According to Statistic Canada, about 27% of working people said they felt a lot or extreme amount of stress on a daily basis. And out of those 27%, 62% of those people reported it was due to work stress. That was their main reasons. Other sources of stress can come from financial concerns, which was 12%, time management or not having enough time, 12%, family issues, 8%, and other issues, personal, 6%. Also, I wanted to mention that the total cost of mental health disorders and mental illness for the Canadian economy is very high. So there was a study made from the commission by the Mental Health Commission of Canada, and it's clear that it costs Canadian economy at least $50 billion. So that represents 2.8% of Canada's 2011 gross domestic product. Also, it can, in these costs, it's related to healthcare, social services, income support account for most of these costs. But it also costs business more than $6 billion in loss of productivity. So either by absenteeism, presenteeism, or turnovers. And those are statistics from 2011. So if we think of, just because I've worked in the hospital, I'm going to give an example in the hospital. So let's say we have an individual that doesn't have a good work balance and has had a burnout and needs to be off work for about 6 months or 3 months. And that individual has sick hours. So the hospital is paying her sick hours, so her full wages. The person needs to be replaced at the unit, so the hospital has other employee replacing her shifts. But also what happens is lately we have less employees, and sometimes we don't have enough employees, so we will have to ask to cover those shifts. We will have to ask the other employees to cover those shifts and pay time and a half. So there is a lot of money that goes into the system because of mental health. So over the next 30 years, the total cost of economy will be more than 2.5 trillion. So those are very interesting facts, actually. When we look at employment, so the employment provides 5 categories of psychological experience that promote mental health, mental well-being. So I know by working, it really helps a person grow, and there's certain factors that do promote mental well-being, and this is what we are going to look into. Okay, so time structure. It gives us a better management of our time. Social contact. It's important to have other social contact than our regular just seeing our family and friends. So by going to work, it gives us a good social aspect. Collective effort and purposes. It gives us a purpose in our life. Also social identity. especially for when my kids were younger, and even now. My kids are a bit older, but I'm not only a mom and a wife at home. When I go to work, I'm a worker. I'm something else other than a mom or a wife. So social identity, and it also gives us a regular activity. It helps organize the routine, um, and also when it comes to social identity, employment offers a social context outside of the family. So those are pretty interesting. So workplace and mental health. So why might an employee not disclose a mental health problem to their employer? And would you believe that there are a lot of people that would not disclose mental health to their employer? Some will, but others might not. So what here is the reaction of others. They're not sure how the employer will react, or how other co-workers will react. So this is the stigma. They're scared to be discriminated, right? Maybe have a different opinion from what the person had of them. Limited opportunities for advancement. So let's say that a certain individual wanted a certain promotion, or even go upline in their jobs, and they start having symptoms of mental health, or their mental health is not doing so well. They might not tell their employer because scared of not being able to get that promotion. Also, they might not know who to talk to, especially if they are working in a big organization. Uh, the policies or might not be clear, especially the accommodation policies, and they are not aware that there are existing accommodation policies. Not recognizing that they are experiencing a mental health problems or denial. We know that some individuals that are experiencing mental health problems and denial might not realize that they are experiencing some. Or they might know, but they are in denial. And also uncertainty of the future and limitation. So here we are going to look into different warning signs that a person could be experiencing mental health problems in the workplace. So we are going to look at consistent late arrivals, absences, so more the person is using more sick days, or they might need to leave earlier. Lack of cooperation, generally ability to work with others. They might have been a good team worker before, and now they're having a harder time. Decrease of productivity. They don't do their work as, they are not as productive as they used to be. They take more frequent breaks away from the office. Uh, there is more an increase in accidents and safety problems. Frequent complaints of tiredness, unexplained pain, difficulty concentrating, making decisions, remembering things, making excuses for missing deadlines, poor work, less interest and participation in work, reduced quality of work, working increased overtime through prolonged period, withdrawn or avoidance, strange and grandiose idea, and displays of anger or defensiveness. So those are all signs that if a person is showing that there might be something that is not going so well. So why may an employee or a supervisor not act to support someone? So my internet was just a little bit unstable. So here we are looking more at the supervisor or the employer. Why wouldn't they help someone that has or support someone that has a mental illness or a mental health problems? They might not know how to help. Okay. Um, Sometimes the person feels uncomfortable and they don't know what to say. Also, fear of consequence from becoming involved, lack of confidence on assessment of the situation, hoping the situation would resolve itself, and having previously been affected by a similar situation. It's not everyone that knows the signs and symptoms of mental illness, and some people, the unknown scares them a little bit. So it's very important for an employer or supervisor, for everyone actually, to educate themselves on um, mental illnesses in order to be able to support either a loved one or an employee. So here are risks and consequences for not acting to help. So if the employer does not help or support, the lack of support may lead to deterioration of the condition. The person can deteriorate. It can also have a strain on the relationships between the employees. There might be feelings of responsibility from other staff to cover for the employee and assume tasks because it's sure that if the person is not feeling so well and is not doing their task like they should be, someone has to take that task, right? Co-workers feeling angry and resentful, co-workers avoiding contact with the employee, deterioration of morale, affecting functioning and ability in the team. So if we think of attitude, okay, if we are a strong team and we have someone coming in with a bad attitude, that can really deteriorate the moral or even deteriorate the attitude in the team. Loss of an employee resulting from disciplinary of the employee experiencing difficulties or choosing to leave. Also, if there is some consequence, there could be a safety risk. Working increase overtime through prolonged period, and there can be an increase of absenteeism and presenteeism. So how can an employer help when it comes to talking with the individual that is experiencing mental health problems? Well, the employer could arrange a meeting to raise concerns and offer support. Be open and flexible. It increases productivity. Research what resources your agency can offer the employee. So it's important to do researches. There's a lot of resources in the areas about mental health and mental illness. Familiarize yourself with your agency's policy on accommodation policies and process. Consider how the job could be modified so the person could keep working and get the support they need. Maybe the person experiencing, the employee experiencing mental health problems might just need, they might not need to be off, but they might need to reduce their hours for the next 3 months so they can just have a little break, and that can help them. So just to look into that. They can also brainstorm ways that the employer can help the individual feel safe and comfortable. It's important to be honest, upfront, professional, and have a caring approach when talking to the employee that has the mental health problem. Think about the employee's strong points and values to the agency and relay this information to them. So it's always fun to, or it's not fun, it's fun, but always good also to what qualities, what strong points do the employee has. And when we give them, it helps them feel better about themselves. Consider open questions that will encourage the employee to seek support and screen out distractions. And another one that I'd like to add to that is ask what can we do for that employee. Make sure that that employee has a say in if you're going to accommodate their schedule. Does it work for them? So those are all little tips. Here are how can an employer help? So the approach in supporting an employee is important. So do not probe or try to diagnose an illness. So even if you know a lot about mental illnesses, it's important not to probe or try to diagnose a mental illness because of certain symptoms or signs that the employee is showing. The only person that can do the diagnosis is the doctor. Approach the concern as a workplace performance issue. Raise the possibility to accommodation if needed. So if there is a possibility in accommodation and you approach that person with that, they might feel relieved. Provide access to an employee and family assistance so that maybe that person does not have funds for to go for help. But with the employee family assistant, they can see someone for counseling. So that can help the person's mental health. And there are also different community services. So we can talk about those community services. Assure confidentiality to be respected, including with referrals. When not only assure the confidentiality, but talk with your employer to explain to them that whatever you guys are talking about, that it will remain confidential. I think it's very important to let that employer know. Also set a time to meet again. So not just meet the person the first time, but just set a time so you can see that person again, see how it's going. In that way that the employee will feel supported. Ensure check-ins happen as promised. So if you say that you are going to check in on your employee, it's important to continue to check in. Follow up with evaluation on work performance and document all meetings fully. Provide ongoing education awareness opportunities for all staff. Those are very important. I know CMHA has all kinds of programs that helps awareness opportunities and educations. And we do go to different organizations to educate staff. That's very important. Here we are going to look into good practices. So when we look at good practices, steps an employee can take to promote the mental health of someone returning to work following treatment for mental health problems and mental illnesses. So as an employer, ensure the physician is aware of all duties they are responsible for. Encourage the employee to follow his or her or treatment plan. Check in with the employee to see how they are doing. Ensure there is wellness plan in place in case of a crisis arise. Consider maybe a gradual return to work, part-time hours before full-time, because it's sure once the person is off for a few months, when the person comes back to work, it's going to be overwhelming to work 40 hours a week because they are not used to that anymore. So a gradual return to work is important. Identify possible stressors or triggers within the workplace. Work to accommodate where stressors may be present. So work pace, noise levels, social events, while avoiding overprotectiveness. Include the employee in the decision related to their wellness. That is very important, to include the employee in the decisions. Also, make sure the individual is treated as a member of the team. And one that is not there is communication. Communicating with that employee. I guess all of that comes to good communication, but having a good communication with the employee and the employer is very important. Make sure that your employee is being heard and also supported. Here we are looking into accommodation. It's sure that sometimes it's not easy to accommodate. It all depends on the workplace, but these are typical workplace accommodation for mental health problems. There can be flexible work schedules. So let's say that the individual is having a hard time sleeping at night and is more tired. Well, maybe she can be on the afternoon shift if that's possible. And if that's not possible, let's say it's at 8 to, if that's not like afternoon shift is not possible, maybe the person can, instead of working 8 to 4, we might switch it to 9 to 5 if that's possible. Also restructuring of tasks, maybe changing the task a little bit, changing to interpersonal communication, interaction with others, handling time pressures and multiple tasks. If that person used to have a lot of tasks for her work, maybe redistribute tasks among employees. If the person has a harder time with noise or is distracted with outside noise, maybe change her office or quiet place, get the person a quiet place to work if possible, and ability to speak with the supervisor when needed. And I do realize that it's not always possible at times. Here are principles of accommodation. So it's create an environment where accommodations are accepted by addressing the individual's needs of each employee. Respect the employee's desire for confidentiality and identify specifically the form and the degree of confidentiality. Be willing to engage in joint problem solving. Make all accommodation voluntary for employees. Be prepared to review accommodation periodically to meet changing needs, and keep in mind that needs may change. So after accommodation has been set, maybe the person has been feeling better and can go back to other tasks. So just keep on checking for or reviewing the accommodation. Be flexible in enforcing traditional policies and procedure. So it's important to look at the policies and the procedure once a year or just review it. Be concrete and specific when identifying accommodation. Consider a flexible work schedule if it's possible. Putting an accommodation plan in writing is a very good idea. So if we put an accommodation plan in writing, we can always go review it. And if it doesn't work, to tweak it a bit. Set up an easy and accessible mechanism for viewing accommodation. Here we are, okay. Here we are looking at emotional wellness, factors that contribute to psychological health and safety in the workplace. So there are different dynamics in the workplace, and it does have an impact on the employees, whether they have mental issues or not. So psychological health and safety at work are likely to affect all people. So the job demands, if there's too much of a job demand, that can affect the mental wellness, but also if there is, I guess, if the job is too I don't like to say boring, but not stimulating enough, that can have also an effect on the emotional wellness. Requirement of effort. So how much effort does it require? Job control. Is there a reward within the job? So when we talk about reward within the job, sometimes there's a lot of demands in a job, but without the reward part of it. My internet was just a bit unstable. And fairness, is it a fair employment organization, and is there a lot of support? So if there's not a lot of support within the organization, that can have effect on the emotional wellness. An organization that does give a lot of support, the person will have a better emotional wellness and will work better. So how can we build mental illness? Managing our stress. So having good stress management skills, exercise regularly, which helps into our mental wellness and helps with our stress level. Eat a healthy diet. So if we eat with the Canadian food diet, that helps if we follow that. Improve self-esteem. Adapt to changes. As humans, some of us are scared of changes, but once we adapt to those changes, we feel so much better. Deal with emotions. Emotions are a big part of our lives. We have all kinds of emotions. We can be happy, we can be sad, we can be overly excited, we can be angry. And we have to deal with these emotions. If the emotion comes, let's say the emotion of sadness comes, we have to realize, okay, I am sad at the moment because of this certain situation, and then let that emotion go on. If we continue to dwell on that emotion, then we are getting deeper into something else. So in order to build a better mental wellness, we gotta acknowledge the feeling and then let it go. Find inner peace. when we find inner peace, it's almost like a sensation of harmony. That really helps. Getting enough sleep. So what we suggest is 8 hours of sleep, but it's different for everyone. Some people need 10 hours of sleep, and other people can function very good on 6 hours of sleep. Relaxation. So have time to just relax, even if it's just 5 minutes to sit down and do a 5-minute meditation or 30 minutes of reading. Take time for yourself and relax. It's also important to manage your time very well. So maybe not schedule appointments after appointments, or just managing time. Build positive relationships. Positive relationships. Have someone to support you. Have someone that you can support also. It's great to have good relationships. Develop strong support network. Give and receive compliments. That most of us are all good at giving compliments, but when it comes to receive compliments, we should just say thank you and appreciate it. But a good example for this is, let's say someone would say, oh, I like your shirt. The response, instead of saying thank you, most of us will say, oh, this old shirt, I just caught it at Frenchie's, or something like that. So when we receive compliments, just appreciate the compliment and be grateful of it and say thank you. Get involved in your community. Either give back. By giving back, it feels so good. It helps with our wellness. It helps of us feeling good. So by giving back, it can be do something nice for a neighbor, or do some volunteering. Sometimes we all have busy schedules, and we don't feel like volunteering, but once we do that volunteering, it makes us feel so good. Or setting priorities. So what are the priorities? Sitting down and making a list of priorities and looking at what is a priority. And another one is problem solving. Okay, so when we come to problem solving, there are different ways into problem solving. We might have a problem that, I'm not thinking of the word, that overwhelms us. So if we break that problem down in little pieces and we work on little problems within the big problem, that usually helps us get to the bigger problem. Okay, just little tips and tricks, and then that helps with our mental wellness. Here are different support strategies. So how can you be a support to an individual that is experiencing mental health problems? Be supportive and understanding. Okay, lend an ear to that person. And when we say listen to that person, don't just listen to response, but listen. You don't just listen with your ear, listen with everything you have. Okay, spend time with the person, listen to him or her. Never underestimate the person's ability. Encourage the person to follow his or her treatment plan and seek out support services. Maybe the person does not know of all the resources there is in the community. So maybe you can search, if you don't know yourself, maybe search for different resources, and maybe you can even search together. Crisis training. Oh, I skipped one. Become informed about mental illness. I think that's a very important one, to become informed, because all mental illnesses comes with signs and symptoms. And let's say the person is an anxious person and is having anxiety, okay? Maybe she can show a sign that she is irritable, okay? And when you see that that person is irritable, you can do a check-in or how she's doing. So when you know the signs and symptoms and you start seeing the signs, then you can support that person. Well, you can always support that person, but even give more support. So it's important to know all the, be informed on different mental illnesses. Crisis training, self-help, or individual counseling will help you become a better support for the person. Make the person's safety your priority. And I think that really goes well with never underestimate the person's ability. Learn to know about community resources. We have all kinds of good community resources, and some that even me working in the community, sometimes I didn't know and about them, and we start knowing them or discovering them. So they are there for us to use them. Here are different community resources for mental health. So you have a family doctor or family doctor, counselors, professionals, spiritual leaders, family and friends, telecare, local addiction and mental health clinic, the chemo helpline, which is open 24/7, and the kids help phone. Oh, and that's it for the presentation. So before I continue into the answers and questions, at the end, when I close my screen, there will be a survey at the end. So if you guys would be awesome and answer that survey, that really helps CMHA get your feedback and what can we improve, what did we do well. We want to know your opinion. So does anyone have any questions? You can put them in the queue and answer. Is there anything that I said that you didn't really understand or that I, because of my internet connection? Perfect. So if you guys don't have any questions, I'm gonna let you guys go. And I'm wishing you all a nice day and hopefully that you guys learned something new today. And I'm hoping that you will have a good rest of the week.